Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, March 28th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about AI in the garden and unique composting locations, operations, all of it, and it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, well, happy Friday, everyone. Yesterday, I potted up our grafted tomatoes, which I will actually save to talk about for next week, but I also started some cucumbers for grafting. So like to do the same thing, but with cucumbers. This will be my absolutely first time trying to graft cucumbers, and I'm duly nervous about its success. But cucumbers have, for me, been kind of an underwhelming crop, partially, I suspect, from planting them into cooler soil in the spring and trying to beat the season. So in theory, grafting could help with that a little bit. But also, you typically graft cucumbers onto a cross between Cucurbita maxima and Cucurbita muscata. So squash, essentially, which feels a little weird and intimidating. So we shall see how that goes. And you know that I will talk about it here because I talk about everything. Speaking of, don't forget that our Kentucky Wildcats play tonight in case you were needing something to do with your blue face paint. So that's exciting. Hopefully we can keep dancing on to play again on Sunday. You'll see based on my mood on Monday how it went. Anyway, it is Friday, meaning Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about how to improve soil in the spring and also spring cover cropping. But the topic that certainly grabbed the most attention in the comments was the discussion about the expectation towards farmers' obligations to their community versus billionaires and the ultra wealthy. The number of people who disregarded my comments on what $1 billion actually is based on the fact that the majority of the billionaires' wealth was tied up in assets was fascinating to me because, yeah, of course it is. I mean, friends, that's Finance 101. It would be hard to make $1 billion if you thought keeping all of your money in your savings account or something was a good idea. The fact that most of the money of the ultra wealthy and most people, frankly, is tied up in stocks and or real estate is a pretty obvious given. But what should also be a given is that they are never that far from their money and could liquidate with some relative quickness, like sell some stock or share in a company or whatever. Getting to that money will be more complicated for some than others, but none impossible to the point that avoiding my statements about that amount of money. Anyway, someone with that amount of money could come up with a more transferable version of that money in a short amount of time. If they so wanted to, I don't know, kindly scrape off a few $100 million, for their community. But basically, $1 billion is still $1 billion no matter where they put it or what form it's in. And yeah, that would require some taxes, which I don't know. Bummer or whatever. I liked this version of that concern, however, from @Joy of the Garden and Home, who wrote, quote, "I get the analogy, but these billions of dollars are not cash money sitting in some vault to swim in, or are they?" End quote. So some of you will not remember Scrooge McDuck, but this was an ultra wealthy cartoon duck who would swim around in a vault full of gold coins. And because why not, livescience.com calculated that the volume translates to about 3.2 billion ounces. And for gold coins, quote, "At the current market price of $1,641 per ounce, its total worth is 5.4 trillion, end quote. Actually, the price of gold has doubled since this article, so it would be closer to 10 trillion, I guess, but you get the idea. So technically, no one person could fill a vault with gold to swim in, but technically, you could fill it with quarters, and at that same volume, it would be something like $4.1 billion in quarters at a more reasonable $1.25 per ounce. The physics of diving into it, however, are not great, but if you're going to have an obscene amount of money, you may as well use it for a vault worth of quarters, right? I mean, not much of a difference. Anyway, then on Tuesday, we talked about culinary herbs, and this from @CheesyBelize sparked a thought. They wrote, quote, "Bolt-resistant cilantro. That is one of the largest misclaims on the seed package ever. No matter the variety, cilantro will bolt if you look at it wrong. I've grown cilantro for a dozen plus years, and I now always harvest it with the roots on. I can then just bunch it with an elastic, and it displays/keeps. Excellent for a market stand. Without the roots, they'll wilt in a heartbeat unless bagged, but with the roots, they're easy to keep fresh looking. Customers love fresh looking cilantro, and many are thrilled to have the roots as they are very flavorful for cooking with or blending salsas. True, I won't get a second cutting, but I think second cut cilantro is poor anyways, end quote. So cool, thanks for the comment, and I didn't know about the roots and salsa. That's kind of cool. And yeah, roots on is a solid way to sell cilantro and keep it looking fresh. No issues there. We've done that in the past, and it will indeed wilt very easily if just left in bunches and doesn't have the roots on. One thing that people should be aware of, though, is that heat resistance or bolt resistance does not mean heat happy or heat loving. Same thing goes for every heat sensitive crop, not just cilantro. So like Salanova is heat hardy for a lettuce, but if you just throw it out in a hot field, it's gonna bolt. It's just that heat-tolerant crops can be talked into growing in hotter conditions with a little extra help from you. It doesn't mean they will resist the heat entirely. Just something to keep in mind this summer, you still have to pamper them a bit. It's just that they will do better than others under that pampering. Same goes for cold hardiness. Crops denoted that way in seed catalogs can take slightly more cold than others, but that doesn't mean they're miracle workers. So that's just worth keeping in mind when you're reading through these seed catalogs. On Wednesday, we discussed cucumber beetles, and I liked this from @KingTheoden88, who wrote, quote, "I don't know, man, I go outside at night and can shine a light across the yard and it will twinkle with wolf spider eyes. And I get absolutely bombarded by cucumber beetles. Last year wasn't bad. All I saw were a few spotted cucumber beetles, but the year before was a striped cucumber beetle infestation. That year I was surrounded by industrial agriculture corn. Last year was soybeans. I think there's a correlation in my situation, but we will see this year because it'll be all corn again around me." End quote. Great comment. Thank you. Now, I can't really speak to the correlation between conventional agriculture, corn, soybeans, or any of that around you and the cucumber beetles, though it is possible they are eliminating some of the biodiversity. That would be helpful for you in this moment, but I can speak for how much we can expect from predators. When I'm talking about increasing predatory species on your farm, I'm not suggesting they can entirely eradicate the problem. It may very well be a simple soil problem or a timing problem. We have found that even in our best soil, if we plant our cucumbers too early, they will get demolished. So waiting a little while has helped, which is why I'm just now starting our cucumbers, as I talked about in the beginning. Also, cukes really, really like their fertility, like a lot. So a good, well-draining, nutritionally balanced soil, free of weed seeds, makes a huge difference. And hopefully those predatory numbers keep the cucumber beetle numbers down a bit so it's not as big of an issue as it could be. And we will also cover the cucumbers with insect netting until they flower just to get them started, basically taking no risks. So increase your predators, absolutely, but also do other things as well for insurance. More on cukes soon, though, as I work to improve our production on that particular crop. Then on Thursday, we talked about how to use vermicompost, and @Nana's Worms wrote about the questioner who was hoping to use horse manure as a worm food. Quote, "My caution would be to ensure hay fed to horses is not sprayed with persistent herbicides. I feed aged horse manure to my worms all the time, but always test it first. I use 10 to 15% vermicompost in my soil mixes and top up plants several times during the growing season through direct applications or drenches. Sandra." End quote. And thanks, Sandra. Yeah, like I said in that episode, if you can compost manures first before feeding them to the worms, you definitely reduce the risk of both herbicide and any potential dewormers getting through. Unless, of course, you can control the feed. I mean, that's the best place to start. But if not, then compost that manure first. But also if it's aged and you can test it through a bioassay, like we discussed, what was that, last week? That may also be a valid option because old manure is harder to compost. Anyway, thanks as always for your amazing comments, you all. You just absolutely rock. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get creative with composting business startups. Yeah, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil is a worker-owned co-op making living soils in Cleveland, Ohio using NOP-compliant food scrap compost. They wrote us, quote, "We're stoked to support Growers Daily because healthier, tastier, and generally more decent food systems start with growers like all of you, inquiring minds who care about the land." End quote. Love the folks over there at Tilth. If you're looking for top-notch compost or potting mix, drop an email to the folks at Tilth via info@tilthsoil.com. That's info@tilthsoil.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. newsletters, right? A necessary evil for CSA farmers. Join Farmhand and real CSA farmers on April 11th for a free digital workshop where they'll share strategies they use to turn their newsletters into powerful sales tools. Get the secrets and go-to templates for success when you register for the free workshop today at farmhand.partners/newsletter. That's farmhand.partners/newsletter. And I'll put the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Tom Beatty, who writes, quote, "Really appreciated your segment on compost in today's show." That would be March 5th. "Since buying bulk compost to start my garden last year, I've been increasingly interested in starting a compost company. I bought several cubic yards of compost from a big name composter in the area, and it showed up chock full of plastic, from tiny slivers to complete grocery bags. It also had tons of wood chips in it, and this stuff wasn't cheap either. I live on the east side of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and have found that the majority of compost available is what you describe as mulching compost, made almost completely with wood chips and unscreened. The main market for compost in this area is landscapers, so I'm not sure if another operation offering screened compost could even survive, but I'm in the early stages of doing some quote-unquote market research. Your comment about starting a compost business being difficult rings true. In addition to sourcing quality inputs, figuring out delivery logistics, and regulatory compliance, you've also got to consider the price of land, truck access, and educating a market. I've not given up yet, though, and plan to keep pulling this thread. I also think composting is a business that lends itself to value-added activities. Compost and its inputs are the base of so many other ventures. It's easy to see how one can lead to the other. Thanks again for all the information you put out there for free." End quote. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Bill. And I know this is not exactly a question, but I feel like it is worth talking about some alternative sort of off the beaten path models for starting a compost business. Models or ideas that I've seen in other areas. Not all of these will be applicable to every locale, primarily for legal reasons, so local laws will still need to be heeded. But maybe this will get the wheels turning for both farmers and composters. That is especially true because the first alternate model I would like to see more of is composting operations being run on farms. Like, I am sure there are farmers out there with at least a little bit of land they do not use or they don't use well and would be happy to have a compost supply next door or like literally on their property in exchange for compost or some other simple lease agreement. Again, local laws will dictate if that's even possible for you, but if I had space on this farm, I would certainly consider something like that. I've said this before as well, I'm sure, but dumps often have mountains of wood chips that they don't really manage very well. Maybe there's a way of working with the municipal waste folks to develop a compost operation on their grounds to divert the use of that quote-unquote waste and turn it into something with more value and better quality for farmers. Also, vermicompost operations. I visited one years ago in a warehouse in a small town in southern Kentucky that could be duplicated just about anywhere. Like, you could use a pretty old building to run a decent amount of vermicompost through. Or what about those like horse stables? Could you help manage their waste in exchange for the opportunity to make and sell it as compost? Also, hit up your local municipal waste director and just ask them what their thoughts are on composting. Dealing with waste is literally their dictate, and I often find them to be quite receptive to composting. Some communities are admittedly sometimes none too excited to have a composting operation moving in. There's often a lot of red tape involved with getting a compost operation going because of runoff and smell and such, but with enough dedication, it is possible. And these compost operations are something that we need more of. I can't tell you how many people ask us every year where we get our compost because the local operations are not super exciting. There's one out there, Charlie, shout to Charlie out there in Western Kentucky, but luckily there are people working on starting new composting operations in the area, and I'm all for it. We need more good composting operations geared around smaller scale production farms, so we are not all just having to make the landscaping compost work for us. I'm sure some of you can come up with some additional ways to cooperatively start a compost operation, so let us know in the comments. Thanks for the topic, Bill. And also, if other Patreon members would ever like to just offer a topic suggestion, doesn't have to be a question, just head over to patreon.com/no-till-growers and hit up the March thread, soon to be the April thread. Otherwise, let's take one last quick break for the week, and then we'll talk artificial intelligence in ag. Oh, that'll be a big one. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's SOW, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. All right, so a topic I have not yet really fully explored is the effect that artificial intelligence will have on market gardening, farming, etc. Part of the reason I haven't really explored this topic much is that artificial intelligence, henceforth AI, is pretty new in terms of accessibility. So understanding what it can or what it will be or what it will be able to do is a very fluid and rapidly evolving reality. In the beginning, when they were making sort of rather amusing mistakes, it was kind of easy to shrug them off, but these programs get better every single day, and that won't necessarily stop anytime soon. And I see some potential positives and some potential negatives for farmers, plus a whole lot of who knows what will happen. So let's go through some of the potential positives. On the positive side, information will continue to become more accessible and precise. I don't know if you've ever tried to ask a book, hey book, when should I plant my peppers in central Kentucky on a north-facing slope? But books are not always the most responsive. Neither are basic search engines. Google, for most of its life, just gave you a bunch of websites that could be related to your query, but were not necessarily the answer to your query. Now, Google gives you not only an answer, but citations, where their answer was kind of pieced together. I glance at the answer that it gives me, but I love visiting the cited sites, which, decent band name. I also like that because I can read through the citations and determine if the information they are giving me in their answer came from a worthwhile source. And sometimes yes, but admittedly very often not. So just be aware of that. Google does not always get it right or get their gardening info from reputable sources or, I don't know, research or anything like that. Also, on the potential positive side is an app like our friend Jack is helping to create called Cultra, CULTRA.US, that looks to help simplify, monitor, and manage soil health like a sort of personal soil fertility consultant. And to be clear, this is not a sponsorship. It just looks really cool, and I'm really proud of Jack. We like him a lot. So in theory, AI could do some of the complex or even hyper-specific stuff that might be hard to figure out on one's own. It may also be more involved in implements and tractors, making it possible on a larger scale, but also perhaps one day on a smaller scale to basically set a tool to task, cultivating or planting or harvesting or whatever you need while you go eat a watermelon in the shade. On the potentially negative side is the energy usage. The amount of energy required to run AI programs is currently enormous, which means more fossil fuels, more pollution, not great for the environment. A recent interactive New York Times article called "Are You Smarter Than AI?" talked about how OpenAI's O3 system was set to do a complicated puzzle that humans can do, and it correctly answered 87.5% of the puzzles. But, quote, the company ran afoul of competition rules because it spent nearly $1.5 million in electricity and computing costs to complete the test, according to pricing estimates, end quote. However, they also ran a more efficient version that got 75.7% of the test correct and cost less than $10,000. So anyway, that energy usage and cost is not great. though it obviously could get better as they improve the high efficiency models and energy usage and all those things. Also, a broader concern is just jobs. Estimates vary, but hundreds of millions of jobs will almost certainly be lost to AI. Some argue that jobs will also be created for monitoring AI and such, but I find I find that a bit far-fetched to believe that industries will replace living workers with artificial ones only to hire new people to watch the AI. I don't know. There will be some, certainly, at least for a time, but not as many as are lost, I would think. With more people out of work, local food will become even more of a luxury than it currently is, which could have significant ripples in the farming world. Then, staying a little broader here, what can and is happening as a result of AI and smartphones is that people, and especially children, no longer have to develop problem-solving skills. I know this sounds a little bit like, complainy, old manny, but this one concerns me quite a bit. If we do not allow children, and increasingly ourselves, to solve our own problems, answer our own questions, then we never develop those skills, or at least we don't exercise them very much. And should anything ever happen to technology, I fear that people will struggle to adequately care for themselves without having the answers right at their fingertips. And to be clear, myself included, I use the computer a lot. It's a big part of what I do. But life is problem solving, so what happens when you take the problem solving need, even the ability, away? Also, in terms of AI's less appealing effects, people like me can have our information stolen and repurposed as an original by AI models. I mean, in theory, someone could just create an AI series similar to this one, complete with dad jokes to give you exactly the Farmer Jesse style video that you want for the specific questions you have, based around your sense of humor or your interests. And I, or specifically no-till growers, will make nothing from it, even if they use my book or these videos or anything else as part of the input for it. I mean, perhaps one day the royalties/copyrights stuff will be figured out and be made more favorable for creators, but I'm going to guess that the workarounds will continue to be substantial enough to basically just ignore them. So anyway, I feel like I'm in a bit of a tough spot with stuff like AI because I want people to grow food. I want them to have access to free information on how to grow that food, but I also don't want to see a world where almost everyone is obsolete and out of work. I fear it will not be the utopia that people want it to be, where everyone is cared for and can just do whatever they want, like instead of having to work, especially if how we currently care for our poor is any indication. Anyway, what are your takes on AI, positive or negative? Is there anything I'm overlooking or maybe exaggerating or under-exaggerating? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there and get into my Kentucky Wildcat costume for tonight's game. So just so you know, don't worry about me. I'm not expecting a win, so I will be fine if we lose, but if we win, I will be freaking out. So maybe do worry about me if that happens. Also, good luck on my Albion facing Forest tomorrow in the FA Cup quarterfinals. I'm realizing it could be a very fun and also very, very depressing weekend. Anyway, don't forget we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soul Handbook or The Seed Farmer over at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Matthew Dickens. Oh, that's a fun name, Matthew. And Stephen Smith, our solo weekly today. All right, so, the town of Glacier Cane is all abuzz from, now that they believe that they are not just a ghost town, but a legit town with a ghost. But what the new residents did not know is that this town wasn't actually just like a ghost town at all, but a town that actually split two dimensions, where on one side you saw what looked like kind of an abandoned ghost town. But on the other side, where Matthew and Stephen lived, was a vibrant little actual town. But the only crossover was, weirdly, gold. Like, they both could see the same gold. However, in the ghost town reality, it had a huge worth, right? Like, we just talked about it. It's like $3,000 an ounce. But in the alternate world, it was used like fine wine, and the residents would consume it. I don't need to go into the logistics. It's a little weird, but they consumed the gold. So you can imagine how bummed Matthew and Stephen were when they were celebrating a birthday to find their finest gold bars had vanished. But it is notable that they weren't capable of turning the lights on in the other dimension. That part remains a mystery. And we fade to black. Or blue. Like a big blue. Go Cats, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching and or listening. Bye.